Hello, everybody. This is Cars and Cameras, Words of Sorrow, whatever you want to call me. Uh, and I decided that today was a good day to make a definitive high level Halo Wars 2 1v1 leader tier list. A mouthful, but a worthy endeavor. Because there are a lot of people, whether they be Team Respawn viewers, might have a penchant for scrolling r/Halo Wars a little bit too much and see a lot of people posting about air and think, oh, my two Wolverines didn't kill 120 pop air. Guess it's OP. Well, I decided today's the day. I'm going to make a leader tier list, and it's going to be not just my opinion, but the idea is this is the definitive high-level Halo Wars 2 leader tier list. This is compiling not just my own opinions, but what I see other high-level players espouse, what they think is correct. So this is 1v1, and this is at a high level. It might be different for lower level people, but this is the definitive high-level Halo Wars 2 leader tier list. I'm just going to go through them as I have them here. So Jerome, he used to be pretty broken. When he came out, he was S tier because I think his upgrades were just as cheap as any of the other heroes. His Mantis, like, the cooldown started after you called in the Mantis, so whenever it died, you could call it back in immediately. It was ridiculous. He ran the game when he first came out, but he was nerfed pretty quickly. And in the more recent patch, which even then it was a while ago, and the reason I'm making this is because I don't think there's going to be another patch, so this is going to be set in stone. And of course, people will always find new ways to play leaders, so it could shift around a little bit, but this is pretty definitive. Jerome nowadays, he got a speed nerf, his hero, so he's pretty damn slow. And while maybe he was A before, or around A, nowadays he's more like C. He just, U and a C in general in this meta, they have to be pretty significant in order to transcend the banished. And I think Jerome just can't do it. He's got some things going for him. Mastodons are situationally good. Most of the time they just get run around by hogs or air and can never really take an engagement. And while if you do take an engagement, it normally turns out well for you, finding that engagement can be pretty difficult. Omega Team is cool, but on 5th point it's pretty hard to afford. Jerome's a very power-hungry leader. His upgrades are very costly, and you have to crutch that hero unit so much, and his mobility got hampered a lot with that speed nerf. It's just usually not a good time playing him. On small maps, he can still be viable for sure, because the mobility doesn't hamper him as much, but generally I would say if you want a good UNSC leader, you should probably steer clear. And then we have Johnson. If you want to make Jerome look good, take a look at Johnson, because he's awful. He's a meme. He's really the only leader in the game who hasn't ever been OP. Like I said, when Jerome came out, he was OP. Arbiter, OP. Ship has been OP many times. Literally, there was a meta where Scout Mine would strip bases. Serina was OP on release, but was overshadowed by Forge back in Season 5. Although she has not seen the light of the OP in a very long time. Atriox was OP at one point. His countermeasured jump pack brutes were broken. Decimus has definitely been OP, like Thick Hide Marauder meta. Yap, OP, still OP. Forge, for sure. We all know about Season 5. Colony, don't even start with him and his 3-minute dev host. Voridus, I'm just gonna... Voridus. Pavium, Burnout 3 pre-nerf was ridiculous. Kinsano has definitely been OP, like in the rabbit meta when turret drop is like second point. Pretty ridiculous. Cutter, definitely before raid nerfs. For sure. Izzy, maybe not OP, but certainly good in the hog meta. And Anders, with her siege, R&D pre-nerf, retriever pre-nerf, Douglas pre-nerf, definitely has been OP. However, Johnson, never once has he been meta. He just normally techs up, builds mechs, either gets outmaneuvered or just beaten a head-on fight and then dies. Because, sure, his late game is good, but he doesn't have the tools to get there most of the time. You have a hero that seems good enough, but he's so middle of the road in so many ways. It's good against scouts because smart missile, but he's not going to have a good time against most other heroes. And he just doesn't have the damage output or speed necessary to make any big offensive plays early on. Bunkers can be good, but they get countered by mines, they get countered by building killers, suicide grunts stun them. Mantises are decent units, especially once you get the shield, but normally for UNSC the point of going vehicles is to run around with them, buy time, do some harassment, and Mantises don't have that kind of mobility, and Johnson suffers for it. You can do some memey stuff with him. I'm sure you probably, if you're watching this video, know about Yodesla, aka RTS Yoda vids. He hasn't gone by that name in a while. However, he's pulled off some cool stuff with Johnson where he'll just build turrets, and whoever he's playing against stupidly will push into him, and digging in turrets will just eat everything alive. Meanwhile, he has another base coming up that's just being neglected by the opponent. But unless you get some cheesy stuff off like that, yes, he's good if you get to the late game. You get the death ball with Colossus and Gales and Wolves and some Mantis. You're just not going to be able to get there most of the time. And it's sad, but that's the way it is. Next. That is an easy S tier. And not really because of my own opinions. Maybe I would put him in A or S, honestly, maybe in between. But for the most part, I think most high-level players think RB is on top. Not the tippy top, but on top. His late game is completely unparalleled. He has all the tools he needs to get there, unlike Johnson. He's got the best grunts in the game. He's got ghosts, which are very good scout units. He's got a ridiculous hero unit. Once he gets Tech 2, basically abandon all hope of ever killing him, as long as he's well microed, because that guy doesn't die. He's got Enforcer drop, which is insane. It used to be third point, which is just unfathomable to even think about these days, because even on fourth point, it's ridiculous. You drop that in on an unguarded base and say goodbye to all of your gens. Turrets will not kill them fast enough. You need Gales or Engies or something on defense whenever you see RBs on fourth point and you're away from your base, because that is a constant threat. Conduit of Rage in general is just really good, and like I said, unlike Johnson, he has all the tools he needs to make it to the late game where he thrives. He's banished, so he has shield generators. And while it's nice to have siphon turrets, those are kind of a meme, especially if you're going against someone who can just build locusts or something like that. Phantoms are incredible late game. Enforcers in general, regardless of the drop, are just a really good unit. A ranged infantry building killer unit. The primary problem with Tech 1 building killers is that they're melee units, and their pathing is awful. So you tell them to do something, and they just run around in a circle. Enforcers aren't like that. Plus, they have a stasis ability, which makes them good outside of just attacking bases. They're good in combat as well. So RB has just got a lot going for him. And his fellow elite leader is up there with him. think most people would probably say Ship is a bit better. I don't know. I'd say he's harder to play because unlike Arby, um, he doesn't naturally outscale every single leader in the game. Instead, he requires some plays. You need to play around Displace, Spirit Support, and then later on Tactical Gateway to outmaneuver people. And he's just really good at doing that. Like Arby, he's got the Elite Grunts and the Ghosts, which are really good. Raid is very good as well for taking nodes very quickly, which is great because Ship's tech is incredibly strong because of that. You open up with a bunch of grunts, you don't really worry about getting your mini stolen and getting rushed because you just get cloak. And it's like, okay, so what, you have choppers and brutes at my base or something, like, you can't see my units, but I'll just kill you. You can then safely tech because you're getting your gen earlier because you're not worried about buying up all your minis. Instead, you use that blue for grunts, you get your nodes fast, you get your gen fast, you get tech 2 fast. That goes into your counter unit ball, which is only supplemented by the fact you have a super mobile hero that can knock down mini bases, kill reinforcing enemy units, snipe enemy heroes. You've got your drop with vet engineers and Jimmy and Timmy, or whatever, Chadwick and Steve or something, I don't remember. They've had a bunch of different names, but the Vet 2, Hunter, and Ranger. It's a really good drop. Maybe the best drop, I'm not sure. Maybe I'll do a drop tier list, I don't know. Ship has a lot going for him. Later on, when you have Wraiths, you can just push a base and displace whatever's on defense and just kill the base. Or teleport to a base. Maybe they are a leader with teleport. Maybe you've even burned Displace. You can still just open up a portal and literally go somewhere else. The mobility is almost endless. There are a lot of plays you can make with him. And that's why I say he would be harder to play than RB, but I don't know, that is my opinion. But regardless of my opinion, I think most high-level players would agree that the two elite leaders are on top of the food chain. Next is Serina. Serina is interesting because there are some maps where she's actually pretty viable. Those maps tend to be the maps where the nodes are very close together. That way, whenever the enemy wants to go anywhere, they have to walk through your frost aura. And that makes things very annoying, especially for Yap Yap or anyone with brute grunts that refuse to do what you tell them to do, because that makes those nodes extremely hard to take back. And that also helps because the maps that tend to have close together nodes also tend to be small maps. And she's good on small maps because her rush is pretty strong. Her rush, most of the time you'll see people go for Bison, but the more deadly rush is the Marine Cryotrooper rush, where you buy up an early mini base, you get your barracks up, you start building cryotroops, you get Marines with them with grenades so that you can counter any kind of scout play, and then you just push them and freeze their economy, get ahead, and then typically you can go into Siege, and after that maybe into Wingman Hornets, get your Tech 3 Bison, which is very good at that stage. You've also got a decent drop with 2 Vet Scorpions, which are very good units. But regardless of all that, if you're on a map like Ashes, you're worse than Johnson. That's the thing. You can't really do much in that situation. And my cat just jumped up on my bed. But yeah, what do you want, cat? If you're on a map like Ashes, if you're on a map like Vault, where you don't really have to go through nodes, you're not going to have a good time. If it's Bedrock or Frontier, yeah, you can win. But I wouldn't... This is not a ladder leader. I'm not so sure about B. Maybe C? Because I'd say Jerome is more consistent, but Serina has the possibility of being better than Jerome, but also worse than Jerome. So I'd say it evens out. They're both deserving of C. Next would be Atriox. I would probably drop him in A. He's pretty easy to play. You just build a Chosen, and so many players will be absolutely terrified to engage you in Tech 1, because killing a Chosen in Tech 1 is quite a feat. Yeah, UNSC have snipers, but guess what? You can build choppers. You can build suicide grunts and wipe them out. It really doesn't take all that much. You've also got a lot of different builds you can do with him, so he remains unpredictable, with fortification builds, early expo builds, Fort 2 builds where you just spam bases and turrets and NGs, countermeasure builds that make your node control better and make your jump pack brutes drop mines, which is really nice if you want to play some Tech 1 stuff. That's normally how I prefer to play it, but he's got more than just his Chosen in his early game, because he scales pretty well. He's really solid at every point in the game. He's got Bulwark, which you instantly negate, Cryoseismic, Enduring Salvo, EMP Mac Blast, Scatter Bomb, Hunter's Brand, Rain of Fire, Inferno, or Archer Missiles, or Napalm Missiles, or Mac Blasts. All of that stuff you can completely negate, and that's obviously a really good power to have, as well as Teleport, so you just keep your Chosen alive 24/7 as long as you're careful with them. Of course, you have Beam, which is a staple. Plasma Mines, the best mines in the game. Eradication is really good for weakening a base and then stripping it. It is a little expensive. It's like a more expensive Inferno, basically. But it's still very useful and is better against units, although it is harder to get a good ERAD off on units, for sure. But if you do land one, it can just completely wipe an entire population. Unbreakable is good. It's a little expensive, but still, we're talking late game where you're going to have a whole lot of eco anyway. His whole kit is really good. Dying Breath. I don't know how anyone could ever forget Dying Breath. That synergizes really well with a Dark Skies play, because so what? Like, I have a bunch of building killers at your base. You might have a bunch of anti-infantry or anti-infantry turrets. It doesn't matter if you can't kill them. Not only do they have massive health bars, but literally you kill them and they don't die. And of course that doesn't just apply to jump pack brutes, but every unit. And it lasts a pretty long time as well. Plus, once they die, you have to automatically, manually tell your units to target the other unit now, because the unit's dead, but your units will keep shooting at them, and that's pointless damage. So you have to, it really forces you to micro, and it's really good leader power, really good hero unit, good late game, good early, good mid, no real weakness, and pretty easy to play. So if you want a good, solid banished leader to get into that you can take far, Atriox is definitely a good option. Also a lot of build diversity. And then next is Decimus. I would put him in the same tier. This is the leader that I'd imagine most lower level players think is like, oh my god, everyone else is down here and Decimus is amazing. Oh no, it's not quite like that. He is very good, but I wouldn't put him in S tier. He's obviously got his 4th point Boundless Siphon, which is an incredible ability, and despite numerous efforts to fix it, often still bugs so that your units are still healing outside of combat, which is nice. You've got 5th point Decimus drop. We call him the Korisasu. He comes in and he drops a purple eradication on your army, and that can often just end a game right there. He's not too fun to play against, but he's pretty fun to play, because literally you just play normally and that's all you have to do, because your most important leader powers are passives, so not a whole lot of skill. Like I said, Atriox is pretty easy to play, but Decimus makes Atriox look like expert level, because all you have to do is spam grunts, and then spam banshees, and that can take you to a pretty respectable champ level. Of course, once you get to a high level, um, that can only take you so far. And cat, stop interrupting, okay? So it does get a little bit more sophisticated, and he's certainly got his good and bad matchups, but for the most part, his matchups are pretty good. Vortex is really good early on. You can kill buildings faster, you can kill enemy heroes super easily with it. Beam obviously is really good. You can upgrade it all the way to level 3, which most people don't, because the telegraph is so long with Beam 3. Boundless Fury is, of course, also a nice perk to have. Basically, he outscales a lot of other banished leaders. Like, yeah, Atriox is cool, but you don't have passives constantly affecting your units. You actually have to take the time to manually use your leader powers, and for there's room for error. All you have to do with Decimus is click on Boundless Siphon and boom. That's it. So, simply because of ease of use, he's pretty high tier, but because of how good those abilities are, he is one of the best. Another one of the best is Yap Yap, which this isn't exactly ordered. If I were to order it, my opinion would shine through a little bit more. I honestly don't know, though, because I haven't thought it through that much. Yap is extremely good. He's got free units, so that means mini steals galore. Grunt Riders are a very good anti-building infantry unit, although they do suffer from the melee, the pathfinding issues. They are also pretty expensive, so unless you only build a couple of them, they can keep you on Tech 1 for a long time. But if you do get that mini steal, you can pull off a rush that is almost indefensible. But what often happens when you play Yap and you go for the mini steal is your opponent will panic buy all their minis. That leaves them with no supplies early on. Meanwhile, you haven't spent anything. You're just pumping free units, or maybe you build a chopper and you're bullying them off their power, their resources, and then you just put up 2 gens and you tech, and by the time they have their 2 gens, you're spamming rangers. Not to mention you have grunt goblins, which are just another level of stupid. So you heard me say how Atriox's Bulwark is cool, and now the cat is attacking my blinds. Imagine that, but 3 of them, and they're on a low cooldown for your 3 hero units. It's that dumb. You've got a really good drop. You can literally drop a shield generator from the sky. It used to be that the Shade Turret dropped stunned, so that meant you got just like free hero kills. Fortunately, that was changed before they abandoned this game, because Jesus Christ, that was not even within the realm of fair. Like with these other 2 leaders, he's got a lot going for him, and his late game is extremely good. He's got methane wagons, which buff grunt units by 20% and debuff enemy units by 20% as well. He's solid at every point in the game, like Atriox. Decimus can be weak at certain points early on in some matchups. Yap Yap typically doesn't have that problem because of the amount of pressure he can put on his opponent with those mini steals. A lot of stuff going for him. Sure, he's got a couple powers which aren't great. Get Back Out There comes to mind. But even Please Don't Shoot Me. Like, if someone throws down a Sentinel network or a Lich, you can literally just waste precious seconds of those powers by using Please Don't Shoot Me. And it's stuff like that, which makes the skill ceiling very high with Yap. Although he's certainly still not hard to play because his heroes are so strong, his units are strong, and he's just a very strong leader. And then we have Forge, who I think we could all agree is also A. I did say earlier, yeah, UNSC is, goddamn it, cat, typically worse than Banished. Forge is one of probably the biggest exception, because his eco is just incredibly insane. Rolling economy, put 2 points into that, and your eco is just going to be ahead of everyone else's, even Pavium's. Maybe not Voridus, who's playing offense, and that alone is great, but you also have a fast-moving vehicle unit, hero unit, unlike Serina, who has a slow-moving vehicle unit. This cat, I'm going to have to throw something at this cat. And, of course, your leader powers synergize with your game plan for the most part. You've got your Forge Hog, and then the individual hogs you build, and the Forge Hog has a defense aura. They can keep up with the hogs, unlike any other hero unit, constantly providing them with that defense aura. Scatter Bomb is one of the best nukes in the game, because it also lags your opponent, which is just great to play against. Kodiak Drop is great. Grizzly Drop is expensive, but also situationally great, especially because your economy is ridiculous, because you're Forge. Anvil Round is a great ability to have. His late game is great, because you have heal, heavy metal, and combat salvage. So that makes his Hornet play extremely strong. So I would recommend him as the go-to UNSC leader if you just want a straightforward, easy to grasp UNSC leader play who is also very effective at a high level, because he can go toe-to-toe with these 4 guys, not so much this guy, but these 4 guys, I'd say. You can play him in a lot of different ways, but for the most part, people will either do a hero opener or just tech into hogs, and either can be very effective. But moving on, we've got Colony, who I would also put in A. Yes, A is looking very cluttered, but there are a lot of leaders that fit in there, and it is mostly Banished. So Colony has the Goliath, which has a very high HP bar. It used to be even higher, to the point where a sniper wouldn't be able to kill it before it finished killing your mini base. Not only that, but you have Skitters, and they, I wouldn't say are what make Colony broken, but certainly a very big part of what makes Colony broken. You put that on a chopper, and that chopper will kill anything until the 3-minute mark, pretty much. You open up with that, and the map is yours to roam and prowl for any unsuspecting victims, because they're going to die if you see them. Unless you're playing against a Pavium and they open triple chopper. You're still going to trade surprisingly well against it. But skits are ridiculous. Goliaths are ridiculous. You have Goliath Drop. Brand isn't the best nuke in the world, but it's also pretty good for base sniping. Your hero is really good. Yes, he's slow, but you have teleport, so who cares? Dev Host, one of the best drops in the game. Drop in Dev Host, put upgraded skits on them, and you have an extremely formidable army. Combat Repair, as well, is like Boundless Siphon that also affects your buildings. Well, it's not technically as good as Boundless Siphon, it's still extremely good. Really a straightforward leader. I'd say the idea of Colony is very straightforward. When it comes to playing him, it is a bit more complicated, because a lot of micro goes into building the skits, attaching them to whatever units need it most, because they actually heal partly the unit that you attach it to. Obviously, Goliath micro, keeping your hunter captain alive. A lot goes into playing Colony, but it's not really hard to grasp. His late game, I know I've said this about most leaders, his late game is very good. Arby is definitely the best late game. And actually Isabel, I would say, is the second best late game. But Colony is not far from those two. He is very hard to deal with in the later stages of the game. But I'll leave that at that. So Voridus, let's see. Is there a... Yep. Yeah. Voridus. That's that. I actually pioneered Voridus, yes. It was Jeff Kills and I back in the day. And people will say, oh, Cars and Jeff pulled the wool over everyone's eyes, making them think Voridus was bad, when really he was secretly OP the whole time. And that's really not the case. Yes, Combat Spoils was better back then, but guess what? Every other leader was also better back then. Like, think about Anders with the Ridiculous Retriever, Ridiculous R&D, Ridiculous Douglas, Pavium with Burnout 3 being ridiculous, Jerome pre-nerf was also crazy. Like, everyone had their own broken thing, and Voridus really struggled with heroes, specifically because, well, his hero wasn't good, had pretty low HP. HP got buffed. That's a small buff, but you have to take into consideration. I don't think there was any chopper buff. It's just people didn't realize how good choppers were at the time, and it turned out that, well, that aggressive chopper play really synergizes with Voridus. Also, the fact that the Grenadiers were just useless. The only reason you would build a Grenadier is because you wanted to get some goo down on the field, and they costed way too much for that use. They would lose a 1v1 against an elite Enforcer, so that tells you just how useless they were. Them being actually good against infantry now changes a lot, especially because his second point is a Grenadier drop. And so, of course, the better the Grenadier, the better Voridus is going to be. But nowadays, yes, he is considered to be in a tier of his own, and is usually just perma-banned from tournaments and show matches. I know Yoda recently has adopted a rule where you can play Voridus, you just can't get combat spoils. And I don't know exactly where he would be placed on this tier list if combat spoils didn't exist, but it doesn't really matter, because it does. And seeing as that is the case, he is number 1. So if you want free wins on the ladder, play Voridus, build units, attack buildings. It's a little more complicated than that, but basically you want to be aggressive, you want to drop that Grenadier on any infantry you see, make sure you have a bunch of units by 3rd point, and you can get off a big Invig push. Invig is a very good leader power that scales pretty well as well. His drop isn't good, but I mean, something's got to be bad about him, right? Cataclysm. If you get off a good Cataclysm, it's just game over. It'll wipe an army in the blink of an eye. The issue is that his late game isn't very good. I know there are some people who contest that, but I have a lot of Voridus games under my belt, and most of the games I won were won either in Tech 1 or with a Scarab push. And if the Scarab dies, you're just dead, because that is the power spike you need to end the game. And if you can't end it there, you're just going to either get trapped in a stalemate or just lose. His late game isn't good because Cataclysm, while it will absolutely wipe the floor with unupgraded units once they have like level 3 vehicle or air, it's not going to do all that much, especially if they have a heal, which most leaders do have. And so that's his main nuking ability, just off the table. So he does have his pitfalls, but his strengths are so good that he completely overshadows every other leader. And Pavium. This guy fell from grace pretty hard. Before Burnout 3, or Burnout in general, was pretty insane. Your eco, like I said, nowadays Forge's eco is better than Pavium's, but his eco used to be completely unmatched. Nowadays, I think I would put him in B. Some people, some people think he's worse. But I've seen some things pulled off with Pavium, and I have pulled off some things with Pavium that I think only Pavium can do, and it's actually rather hard to stop. He is not the easiest leader to play, because with Burnout, you have to make sure your timings are pretty on point. You need to make sure you're making the most out of your starting units, because, well, Burnout lets you get out more of them. And of course that means you need to really be out collecting, denying enemy collection in order to really make the most out of that, because that's your only ability for 2 or 3 points. And most leaders will have an offensive power, and you need to be able to outmass them, which is really a big issue with Pavium, because once it gets to the late game, you can't outmass. You're both going to be at 120, 120 pop. And Burnout doesn't help at that point. Plus, your abilities are really hard to land. Rain of Fire, landing that on an army is pretty difficult, which is why and I think most people at this point, I don't know, use it on buildings instead, and it's very good for that purpose. Ultramines, there is a thing you can do with Ultramines and Pav Stand to make it so that they arm while like the enemy is standing on top of them or something like that, which is nice, and they are good if you can get them off, but it's just difficult. It's difficult to land his powers. It's also difficult because you don't have passives. Like I said, Decimus, if you find yourself in mid to late game Deci versus Pavium, you're just gonna die unless you made some big lich push and severely cripple his eco, and you can just outmass him. Late game Pavium is just the worst banished. I don't think that's very debatable. His late game, sure, he has a good turtle, but late game you just can't make any offensive pressure happen. Yeah, sure, mega turrets are cool. How are you going to push a base with mega turrets? Your limos, Wraith Invaders, they're funny, I guess. Points for being funny, they're a meme. That's about all they're good for. His Wraiths aren't special, his Banshees aren't special. None of his mainline units are special. He just has more of them, and in the late game that doesn't matter. The Pavium Hero unit is not particularly good. It's cool that you can lock him in a base and have him perpetually heal it, but if that's his best use, then you know that he's not that good. So B is a little optimistic, but I like Pav more than most people like Pav. So that's... I am injecting a little bit of my opinion into this, even though I am trying to kind of give everyone the whole picture and what most high-level players would say about the tier list. But I will move on to Kinsano now, who is another pretty good UNSC. So by I mean pretty good UNSC, I mean just like B, because, well, UNSC is below banished, like objectively. She's got Heat of Battle, which is basically like Killing Frenzy, but better, I think. So her rabbits are really good. You've got a stun on second point, which is nice. Another stun on third point with turret drop. You have a lot of stuns with her, which is nice, because you also have Flame Wall with Kinsano Cyclops, which can deal with groups of units very quickly. For the most part, your game plan with Kinsano was to just spam units and send them around the map and not take engagements. So it is hard to expo with her, but she does pretty well on one base because she's got a bunch of drops, she's got a good hero unit who's tanky, fast, and hard-hitting. Really no weakness there except she can't hit air, which isn't a big deal. You've got some very scary timings with not just Inferno, but your big drop, which gives Hell Charge to all the units you drop it on. Hell Charge is a very good ability. There was a brief period of time where Hell Charge was ridiculous. And I'm glad it's not anymore, because she was probably up here during that brief period of time, and it wasn't fun. Not all that much to say about Kinsano. Her hogs are a problem in Tech 2 because they are worse than normal hogs. So against other UNSC, typically they'll just spam hogs against you, and it's really hard to deal with. Kinsano versus Forge is one of the worst matchups in the game. Her Tech 2 is really her biggest issue. Her Tech 1's good. Tech 2, she hits a big slump, and then Tech 3 is actually really good. She has a very good late game. Heat of Battle Scorpions are a great thing to have. Heat of Battle anything is a great thing to have. But also Redline. Redline's really nice. There's a glitch you can do with Redline with CT Marines, where whenever you research the CT upgrade, it reignites the Redline effect. I think because it adds another unit, or another person to the squad, so it thinks it's like a new unit. I don't know how. I guess that's how it works, but a pretty good thing you can pull off, and it makes her CT timing very scary. It can strip a base very quickly. Her harassment is nearly unparalleled. It's just her Tech 2 is a big weakness. So that's why she is in B and not A. And Cutter. Cutter is a guy who I think could maybe be in between A and B, but I would say for the most part he probably loses to Yap, to no. I think this is more even. Honestly, I don't know too much about his matchups with these guys, but I would say they could go either way, but still I would probably put him in B. There's a lot more that can go wrong when you're dealing with an infantry-based leader. Like, oh no, I'm in a bad position. I have an army of hogs. I'm going to drive away. When you're Cutter, yeah, your infantry is fast, but it's still infantry. There are a lot more misplays you can make. It's so much easier to get your army wiped when you're dealing with infantry. And while you don't have to play infantry with Cutter, it's definitely very incentivized that you do so. He's got a lot of strong stuff going for him. Fast infantry is great. He's got ODST on third point, which is a very good power spike to have. You've got your Spartan. Just having a Spartan is great because it's a great hero unit. But having that stun, you have your ODST drop stun, drop that on an army, and then jump on their army again with your Spartan Slam while you throw the ODST mines on them, and then boom, the army's gone. And you have a bunch of different combos with Cutter like that. You also have Archer missiles, which is great. Like Kinsano, you have a scary 5th point timing with the ODST assault group. Close air sport isn't so good, but if it's late game and you can spare the cash, it is good for getting rid of turrets and that kind of thing. He's definitely solid. If you're good at node control, and this is your leader, because it's really hard to contest a Cutter's node control. He grabs them so quickly. But there's a lot of different stuff you can do with him, although it's primarily infantry-based, and that's a strength and a weakness. So not too much to say about Cutter. His late game is eh. Kinsano's is definitely a lot better, but it's workable. It's definitely workable. He thrives in the early and mid game, though. But like Forge, I'd say if you're starting with UNSC, this is a good leader to pick. Although, like I said, it's a lot easier to get caught with your pants down with them, so the skill required is a bit higher. Next we have Isabel. I have no idea if she goes in B or C. I'm going to put her in B, I haven't been playing her, and I have not been seeing people playing her. But based on the idea of her alone, I think B is a good spot. Because you have a Spartan, you have mines on early on now, which is nice. You didn't have that before. Hollow Decoy is also a nice thing to have early on. Um, her hog game's pretty good. Just once you're 2 base, you just sit there and wait till you outscale, because you outscale everyone except Arbiter, which is obviously very nice. Obviously, Scorpions in their buff state are really good, and that makes the best offense extremely good. I just think that her early and mid are a little bit lacking, but I think you have the tools you need to get to the late game. Once again, unlike Johnson, it's just there's a little bit more doubt there. With Arbiter, it's like, yeah, definitely, if you play it right, you can get to where he's strong. And even before late game, he's still strong. Same can be said to Izzy, but I think to a lesser extent. Like if you just crutch a hero and turrets and then have hogs going around attacking things, and then you get to tech 3 and go from there, you're probably going to be in a winning position. But there are still definitely holes. Obviously, like I said, I haven't been playing her, and people typically don't play her in show matches. For the longest time, she was considered to be bottom of the barrel. Like since release, she was considered to be so bad, and in the hog meta, she was considered pretty good. But for the most part, she was considered bad. But I think she's still pretty untested, and in theory, she's not bad. She's pretty middle of the road, but could definitely be used quite effectively, I think. But there is a reason you don't see her in show matches or tournaments. It's because people like to go with the tried and true method instead. So if you're feeling daring, you can play Isabel. It's going to definitely be a defensive playstyle, but once you hit your stride, you're going to be very hard to stop. And then Anders. I did not intentionally save her for last, but this is my favorite leader. Yes, for a long time I loved Voridus. That's because he was the underdog, and people thought he was bad, and well, I stand by it, he was bad. But nowadays, obviously, that is not the case. However, Anders, I would put in B tier. I'd say she's the 4th best UNSC. I'd say it goes Forge, Cutter, Kinsano, Anders. And that is debatable. And certainly being 4th best UNSC when UNSC is considered the worst faction isn't great. But I do think you're still better than these 3 at least. I'd say she's probably also better than Izzy. Probably better than Pav as well. I don't know for sure. Obviously, I haven't done every single little calculation. But R&D, even if it in its nerf state, allows you to get a quick CT, allows you to get quick vehicle upgrades, which also contributes towards your leader point progression, which is great because your 5th point power spike is massive with a retriever. You spawn that in, and you basically pin your opponent to their side of the map, because they know the moment they step away, the thing is going to come looming over their base and strip their eco. It's also good in a direct engagement, even beyond harassment. It used to be ridiculous, and it's still pretty powerful, especially in combination with Douglas, who I'd say is the best Spartan. Alice, like I said, I haven't seen a whole lot of gameplay. Alice is good and all, but Douglas also has an exploit against air, where you just wiggle, and he shoots super fast against air, which is nice to have. Having mines, turret drop, and arc defense as 3rd point options are nice, because it gives you a lot of adaptability. You need a hero you need to kill, you can stun it with a turret drop. You need to deal with vehicles or buildings, arc defense is a good option. You're dealing with massive infantry, or maybe hog harassment, and you want to like scatter mines around the map, or you want to do like a mine slam combo. That's something I like to do a lot against infantry, and it's very effective. Synergy, obviously her 4th point isn't great, because it does nothing for you, except give you a shield on your retriever, which you only have by 5th point. but it definitely pays off because the Retriever is just so good. You've also got the best siege in the game. You've got shielded turrets, which I believe that actually R&D 2 makes your shielded turrets better than R&D 1 shielded turrets. I haven't tested it, but I think it stands to reason. I think her kit is pretty well-rounded. Network is also very good. Don't sleep on network. It can make a very unthreatening push, game-ending. You can just cause a lot of chaos with Anders. Like I said, my favorite leader, so I would advise you go with her. But B tier is where I believe she fits because she struggles against a lot of leaders. I'd say her favorable matchups would be Izzy, Pav, it's like even, relatively even. Kinsano is favorable. Serina, Jerome, Johnson probably favorable. And that's really it. Everything else is still definitely winnable, but it's an uphill battle. But with that siege, with that sentinel, you can still pull off some plays. Surprise victories can still happen for sure. So you can see the game is, I guess it's relatively balanced. I didn't plan this, but look, 1, 1, 2, 2. What is that? 5, 5. It's balanced, guys. No need. They abandoned the game because it's in the perfect state, right? Definitely no. But don't let this deter you from maining a leader like Johnson, because if you love Johnson, you can play Johnson, and that's fine. I get a lot of satisfaction from playing bad leaders and getting wins with them. It's a universal feeling. I'd like to think everyone likes doing that. But if you want to be super competitive, you're gonna want to play these guys. Maybe even this guy if you're feeling scummy, and also these guys. But everyone's viable in their own ways except Johnson. No, even Johnson can. I wouldn't say viable, but he can still manage a win every now and then. So that is the definitive high-level Halo Wars 2 1v1 leader tier list. Trying to kind of coalesce high-level opinions, of course injecting my own opinion as well, but I tried to be somewhat objective. So thank you for watching. I have no idea how long this turned out to be, but I hope you enjoyed it and it was informative. So I'll catch you whenever next time is. See ya.